Okay, so we're up to the last clause in our multi-clause mishnah that we've been doing. And this is im ein Kemach in Torah, im ein Torah in Kemach. If there is no flour, there's no Torah. If there's no Torah, there's no flour. Okay, so like we've been doing, let me start by rereading the questions that we asked on like the mishnah as a whole, and then we'll ask new questions on our clause. So on the mishnah as a whole, we ask, what is the meaning of if there's no X, then there's no Y? What is this saying about each of these things? And if you take it literally, how do you get started? The approach we've been taking is like what so far I've seen all the Mefarshim say, which is not that you can't have one without the other, but that they're complementary, that each one completes or perfects the other. But despite that, that's still not an answer to the question because each one, first of all, each clause might be using it in a different way. And also it might have a different type of interdependency than depending on what you're talking about. So that still is that answer is the answer we're working with, but it might change in our clause. Okay, next, for all these variables, are having and not having to be understood in a binary sense, or is there a quantitative sliding scale? Next question is now we can finally actually probably answer this one. What is the relationship between clauses 1 and 4? Because 1 is in Torah in derech eretz, derech eretz in Torah, and then ours in Kemach in Torah is also about Torah. So is there a relationship there? Is the word Torah even being used in the same way? How do you describe the relationship between all three of those things? Next question is, what is the practical application or lesson of each clause? 6, who is the intended audience of the Mishnah? If it is for our primary audience, which is the Chassid in training, so do you really need to tell them these things? And if it's for everyone, then to what extent is it for everyone? Does it apply? Another question is, what does the Hava mean of each clause? What would we think if we weren't taught this? Why would we think that? And then the last question, which we might be able to answer now, is there an order to the clauses in the Mishnah? So those were the questions that we had on all the clauses, but now questions on just the new clause. What are the questions? Yeah, Tamar.
I guess I want to ask like what is meant by flour, and I specifically want to ask like how specific is this? Like,
okay, good.
For example, is this food?
Right.
Or
okay.
is it just, like specifically flour?
Okay, right. So if it's so I guess if it is a generic like a general term, you can ask why specify flour, and if it's specifically flour, flour, why specify flour? Yeah, right. Yeah, and we have a word for food. It's called food. So this question does have to be answered. So that's a good question. Okay, next. Yeah, tomorrow.
Like, what kind of Torah are we talking about?
What does Torah mean in this context? So you said what kind of Torah are we talking about? I would say even like just very broadly speaking, is this talking about the learning of Torah or the practice of Torah? And is this referring to a specific subdivision within either of those categories? Yeah, Lauren?
I guess given that this is like the last phrase of the Mishnah, I'm wondering if maybe we could think about if there's any relationship with amongst like all four of the clauses.
Yeah, that's actually a good question to add at the end, which is what is the unity of all four clauses, right? So are these just like examples of interdependencies, and the Tana could have chosen some other example, or are these intrinsically related or mutually, or like what do you call it when you mutually exhaustive is not a phrase. What am I thinking of? Like
the mutually exclusive?
Yeah, not mutually exclusive. Maybe just exhaustive. Is this an exhaustive list? Or is this an exhaustive list within some like larger category or like subject? Yeah, that was a long-winded question, but good question. I mean, I did a long-winded way. Okay, What else? I feel like there's one more powerful question, at least. It might be more, but yeah, Alex.
Is there a reason these 4 clauses are ordered in this specific way?
Okay, yeah, I think we did list that one. Yeah, is there an order to the clauses of the Mishnah? So that is a good question. Already got that one. Yeah, Lauren.
I guess like how does this relate to the chassid?
Okay, yeah, that is also one of our general.
Maybe that was
questions.
already said.
Yeah, that's fine. So what I would ask here is, I think this is the only place where we ask this, is like, it doesn't seem to be true that if there is no Torah, there is no flour, right? Plenty of people have food or flour and no Torah. Okay, so what is this saying? In other words, I think just because we had a hard time even defining these other things, we didn't really have that kind of question, you know? But here, it just sounds like an outright falsehood. Yeah. Okay, I think those are the questions. Okay, anyone want to try answering any of the, anyone want to try answering the first 3 questions? Because we can't really answer the all the other ones without, you know, without having some idea for these. I should preface this, by the way, before I call on anyone, by saying, you know, it's very funny how, like, not with my shiurim in general, I think specifically with like Pirkei Avos here, I find I am super nervous that either certain shiurim, I'm nervous that we're not going to get any ideas because I won't be able to, like, you know, convey it clearly, or we won't find anything. Other ones, I'm nervous that, like, the ideas are too simple. This is one where I feel like I'm nervous the ideas are too simple. So we really have to, like, work on, like, mining this for chidushim. Yeah, tomorrow.
I have a question on one of your questions.
Sure.
So this is question 2.
Mhm.
When you say the practice of Torah, do you mean like doing mitzvos? And then I guess if so, is that a normal thing that you see where it says Torah and it refers to mitzvos?
It's a good question. I mean, I do mean keeping mitzvos. I'm trying to think of another place where we say that. Like, it's a good question. I mean, we say Torah tziva lanu Moshe, right? That's not referring to the learning. That's referring to the entire, like, Taryag. You know, Torah tziva lanu Moshe. You know, that he commanded us.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. I haven't done I don't know how much, like, Chazal uses that way, but yeah. Okay, so if no one has any ideas, we'll go to the Mefarshim. Okay, so let's go to the Mefarshim. So we're gonna do Rבינו Yona first. Rבינו Yona, I think, is the most straightforward of these, and I did have time to translate. Yeah, Lauren.
Sorry, I guess for flour, I was thinking just to say something. Doesn't it usually refer to like money or business or? Okay,
it's a good question. I'm trying to think. Are there other examples of that? Like, are you thinking? You have anything specific in mind, or you're asking?
I guess I feel like I've heard this term quoted and referring to, like, about like how you need to have a business and you need to work. Like, you can't. I mean, I feel like that's where I've heard it from.
Right. That might come from here.
Yeah, that's why my association is. That's why I thought flour here doesn't mean literally food, and it means more like money or parnassa, but I'm not.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're
sure.
definitely right. You're definitely right. Yeah, I was just wondering if you were drawing upon something else, or I think it is possible it's from here. Yeah, I mean, the other common thing that is not just in Torah is people definitely refer to bread as your livelihood. You know, so like, you know, breadwinner, or like, you know, the shulchan in the and like the showbreads are like allusions to like parnassa, seemingly. Yeah, Tamar.
This is like a half idea. So if you want to finish what you're saying, yeah. Were you done with what you're saying? I didn't mean to,
I'm done with what I'm saying. Yeah.
Okay. Didn't mean to, like, change topics abruptly. Okay. I guess this is just, I think, what people mean when they say in Kemach and Torah when they quote this. So I'm not really saying something super novel, but I think, like, maybe it's like, as opposed to thinking that if you just learn everything will work out, there's this idea that no, you have to spend some time establishing parnassa, because otherwise you're not going to be able to learn.
Okay, right. So that is going to be the approach that Rבינו Yona takes. Okay, and that's what I'm going to say is the challenge that we have to like see if we can see chidushim in that. Okay, so here's what Rambam Yona says, and I did have time to translate, I think, everything here. All right, im ein kemach ein Torah. If there's no flour, there's no Torah. Lefi shetzarech lachzor achar parnasasa, because then he would need to seek after his livelihood. Ve'inu yachol lasok b'Torah, and then he would not be able to be involved in Torah. So that's exactly what Tamar was saying, is that, like, you need to work, because if you don't earn a living, then you won't be able to be involved in Torah. So you need to do this to facilitate your Torah. Okay, but then he flips it in a way that is not symmetrical. Im ein Torah in Kemach. If there is no Torah, there's no flour. Klomar me'achar she'in bo Torah. Since he doesn't have Torah, ein to'eles haKemach ole. Then the flour will not yield a beneficial effect. She'ein adam mo'il ba'ashro ella kadei sheyihiyu tzarchei gufo mitsuyin, because a man is only benefited by his wealth in order that his bodily needs should be available, vihi lo pnai lasok b'Torah, and that he should have the freedom to be involved in Torah. Okay, so let's break this down. Okay, so according to, let's just go summary of Rabbeinu Yona. So let's get like the so let's get the Hava Amina of im ein Torah, im ein Kemach in Torah. Okay, and then the hold on a second here, I'm just gonna copy and paste these things. Okay, so Hava Amina, and then the idea. Okay, and then the Havamina of im ein Torah in Kemach, and then the idea. Okay, so the way Tamar said it, we'll start with what Tamar said, and then I think we'll elaborate here. Is like, well, let's just say it again, right? So what does the Havamina? He's saying, okay, let's start with the ideas, okay, and then we'll flesh it out. So he's saying the idea of im ein Kemach in Torah is that you need a livelihood to be involved in Torah. Okay, right? So what would the Hava Amina of that be? So one possibility is what Tamar said. Tamar, you just want to repeat what you said in light of this?
Well, okay, what I had said before was that the Hava Amina would be that if you only focus on Torah and don't think about your livelihood, then somehow things will work out.
Okay, right. So if you only focus on Torah and don't focus on your livelihood, then somehow things will work out. Okay, so I just want to elaborate on that. So I'm sure I've told this story before. In fact, I probably said this, I think, when we did something earlier in this chapter. I feel like I said this with the money thing, but I'll tell the story again. Is when I was in 11th grade, then I had a Rebbe in high school who was very from the Meiri yeshiva. And he was trying to persuade us of this Hava Amina, okay, that we should not, I can't remember if it was that he was anti-college or if that he was anti-secular studies or maybe some other thing. So he said that really a person should just learn. And then the phrase he used is, he says, just learn, trust in God, and the money will fly into your bank account. Okay. That was the phrase he used, and I think someone, I don't know if it was me or someone else in the class, said, like, what do you mean? And he said, you'll just check your bank account and like there will be money there and God will have just provided. Okay. So that is not how we operate. Okay. That is not a real thing. I mean, that's like, that'd be like, we say in some kanal ace, right? We don't rely on a miracle. Okay. However, there is a basis in the Masorah for what he's saying. Okay. It actually happens to be a machlokas. Does anyone know the machlokas I'm referring to about work and Torah? And if not, then you're in for a treat. Okay, so my intent in showing you this is just to expose you to the facts. Okay, I don't think we should attempt to understand the machlokas or the Gemara here. If you want, we can do this as another shiur, but you should just be aware of the facts here. Okay, this is a Gemara in Brachos Daf Lamed Hey Amud Beis. Taner Rabbanan, it was Taner Brisa. V'asafta deganecha, you shall gather your grain. Okay, I assume that's from the Kriya Shema. Ma Talmud Lomar, what does this teach us? Okay, like why does it need to tell us that you should gather your grain? So the answer is Lefisha Nemar, because it says in Sefer Yehoshua, lo yamush sefer haTorah hazeh mipicha, that let not this book of the Torah depart from your mouth. Yachol devarim kichsavan. You might think that things are as they are written, meaning you might think that you should never stop like learning Torah. Okay. Tamlomar, therefore the pasuk tells you the asafta deganecha. Hanheg bahen minhag derech eretz. Minhag derech eretz. Therefore, the pasuk says you should gather your grain, which means you should conduct yourself in the practice of derech eretz, which in this context means not like in our Mishnah. Here it means earning a livelihood. Okay, divrei Rabbi Yishmael. Those are the words of Rabbi Yishmael. Okay, so he's saying that there actually is a legitimate hava amina that that Torah should be the only priority, and you should not do derech eretz. So therefore, the pasuk has to tell you that you should be involved in derech eretz. Okay, but that's not the strange position. Strange position is Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Omer, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai says, Efshar Adam Choresh b'shas Harisha v'zoreh b'shas Zriya v'kotzer b'shas Ktira v'dash b'shas Disha v'zoreh b'shas Ruach Torah mat hela. So is it possible for a man to plow when it's time to plow, and sow when it's time to sow, and harvest when it's time to harvest, and thresh when it's time to thresh, and winnow at the time of the wind? What will happen to his Torah? Ella, rather, Bisman Yisrael Osin Ritzono Shel Makom, when Israel does the will of God, Malachta Nasis Al Yidei Acherim, then their work will be done by others. Shneimar, as it says, V'amdu Zarim V'ra'u Tzonechem. It says in Yeshayahu, strangers will stand and feed your flocks, and then the rest of the pasuk says, and foreigners will be your plowmen and your vine dressers. So the non-Jews will do the work of the Jews. But when the Jews do not do the will of God, malachta nasis al yidei atman, then they will do their own work. Shenemar, as it says, you will gather your grain. Okay. Not only that, acherim naases al yadan. Not only that, but the work of others will be done through them, meaning through the Jews. Shenemar, as it says, you shall serve your enemies. And then the rest of the pasuk says, whom God shall send against you in hunger and thirst, in nakedness, and in want of all things. So again, you got both of them are darshaning the same pasuk, which is what does it mean you should gather your grain? So Rabbi Yishmael is saying that is l'chatchila, that we should all work. And you might think that you should be involved in Torah all the time. No, you have to work. Okay, so gathering your grain is describing the norm and what God wants us to do. But according to Shimon bar Yochai, gathering your grain is the b'diavad. Is no, really, you should be involved in Torah all the time. And if Israel does that, then their work will be done for them by others. But if we don't do Torah all the time, then we will have to gather our grain. So it's the non-ideal situation, and we're going to work for our enemies. Now, ordinarily, when you have a machlokas, okay, then you would expect that the Gemara paskins, okay. Again, I don't know if any of you have heard this Gemara before. Anyone know what the Gemara's conclusion is here? And it might surprise you about who we paskin like Rabbi Yishmael or Rabbi Yishmael. Yeah, Tamar?
I'm not sure because I think I've heard of this, but it was a long time ago. Something like Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai is right, but he's the only one who can do it, or something.
Oh yeah, very, very, very similar to that. Okay, so the Gemara says, Amar Abaye said, Harbe asu Rabbi Yishmael. So many people did like Rabbi Yishmael, meaning they worked, Va'al Sabyadan, and they were successful. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, but others did like Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, V'lo al Sabyadan, and they were not successful. So I think Tamara's interpretation of it, or what she heard, is like that does seem to be what it's saying. Like it's not weighing in. It's not saying Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai is wrong, but it's saying like good luck with that. Like that's not really gonna work out for you. Okay. So going back to our Rבינו Yona. So it is interesting that this Mishnah seems to, okay, first of all, going back to my high school Rebbe, even Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai does not say the money will fly into your bank account. Okay, he says that God will arrange it so that non-Jews do work for the Jews. And it's interesting because Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai doesn't seem to be talking on an individual level. He seems to be talking about on a national level, So like that's why I'm saying that what my high school Rebbe said, is very sketchy to say the least. Okay, but even with this Gemara, it seems like our Mishnah in Avos is advocating Rabbi Yishmael's approach that you should learn, so you should work, because if you don't work, you're not going to get enough for learning. Okay, so I think that is the direct havamina that this is commenting on, but I think there's still more to be said. Yeah, Lauren.
No, it just referring to like your Rebbe from high school. It
Yeah.
does happen in Israel, though. I feel like, well,
Right.
a lot of
Yeah.
I guess, I mean, their money goes into their bank account, but it's coming from other people.
Right, exactly. Yeah, right. The Jews are doing the work for them. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think if I may comment on this group of like us here, I think we are in a position where, for us, this is not really a chiddush. Okay. As much, but I do think that like Lauren's right, that there are people who do attempt to live like this, and there are people who succeed in living like this. But the question is it sustainable? You know, like there are other models as well, like the Kollel model in in the United States. I mean, also in Israel, but in the United States, like, you know, people say that the reason why there are so many like frum Jews who are able to like learn in Kollel and not work is either, you know, the wives are working, in which case like that is not sustainable, especially if they're also like, you know, having kids, caring for kids, and like taking care of the whole house. But then the other source of this is rich father-in-laws. And the only reason why there are rich father-in-laws is because you had a generation of people who actually work for a living, you know, so it's not sustainable on a generational level, you know. So like that's a whole thing that that I think that there are, you know, people who need to hear this. But what I'm curious about is the emotion, okay, that like or like the cause of this havamina. You know, what we're really talking about is like manifestations of this havamina, that people think that it's going to like work out for them, you know, and like they bank on that. I'm wondering like what is the emotional havamina here that is causes a person to believe that this is the case. Yeah, Lauren.
I mean, I wonder if it's like this attitude that like everything, like things, like you don't need to put in so much hishtadlus, so like Hashem will just take care of everything because I'm a good person and like things will just work out, or my Torah will be protective, that it will be like, it'll be enough. Like, I guess there is like this attitude, well, especially amongst, I mean, I don't know, it's very complicated, like with the Haredim in Israel, but I know like our family that's Haredi, they'll say like, right now, like I'm telling my boys that their Torah learning is protecting, you know, the Jewish people too, just like the army. And on a metaphysical level, maybe it is true, but it just feels different, you know. And I don't know, for them, when they say it, it comes from a very, like, when they talk about it, it feels like it's coming from like an unintelligent place,
Right.
very or simplistic worldview, I guess.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if this is like countering that, because I definitely feel like they probably would assume the Havamina that like it all works out, and they've actually said that in terms of like, you know, somehow the money works out. Like, you know, when they get married, it's a big thing that you have to buy the couple an apartment. And one of our cousins being like, you know, it just worked out that, you know, I didn't know how I was going to afford my daughter's shidduch, but then all of a sudden COVID happened and we got the stimulus checks and now we were able to afford the apartment. So I don't know, they put themselves in situations that don't really seem so smart. But they also justify it with like, it'll all work out. But I don't know if that's what the Mishnah is really countering, because maybe it assumes like we're smarter than that, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, I so just to comment on what you're saying here, and then I'll call on tomorrow as well, is that this is what I like about tomorrow's formulation of somehow things will work out. I do think that there is an underlying magical thinking here, you know, like a magical thinking, an infantile thinking of like mommy and daddy will take care of everything, or in this case, daddy will take care of everything, you know. And maybe sometimes literally like, you know, daddy will like take care of everything. But I do think it's a magical thinking. I think what is seductive about this form of magical thinking is that we do maintain that there is such a thing as hashgacha pratis, you know, and we do maintain that there is reward and punishment. And that's why, you know, religious magical thinking is some of the most dangerous types, because it can very easily be like supported by real concepts, but you're relating to it in a magical, you know, wish fulfillment, impractical, or sometimes even like reckless way, you know. And so I think that that's part of the psychology. I know I'm not defining it. I'm just trying to show like what area it's coming from. Yeah, Tamar.
Yeah, I guess I'm just adding to this line of thinking about like why this is appealing, because like I feel like you know, I wasn't like raised in this kind of environment where it's like I feel like I always was told or raised in like you have to earn a living. So that to me is like not directly the thing that I relate to, but I feel like I still get it, you know, in terms of like I feel like when you're actually making decisions in like the short term, when something's in front of you, okay, like we don't, maybe I would never like held of a cola model, but I feel like other things like you feel like I'm doing the right thing, so then how could this not be the right decision? Let's say, for example, if you know, like whatever, you maybe don't really look into some job thing because you're busy learning, like it seems like a good idea, you know what I mean? In any particular, it could feel like really hard to be doing something that isn't learning if you could be learning, for example, to think that that's actually going to be the right thing.
Right. So I think that is the other element of it, which is that I think it is, you know, Torah is so important that how could I justify, you know, doing other stuff? And I think that the mistake there comes from a different kind of magical thinking, not a magical thinking in terms of practicality, but in terms of like, it's almost a denial of the reality of means and ends, you know, that like in reality, you know, you have a body and the body has needs, and the needs are supplied through goods, and the goods are attained through commerce, you know, like, and that's how God set up the world. And like, just like you would never expect your body to get nutrition without you eating, you know, and if you try to use this reasoning and say, like, how could I justify putting food in my mouth when nutrition is so important? We would laugh at you. Like, how else do you think you get nutrition other than by putting the food in your mouth? You know, but here somehow people think that you could get the end without the means of, you know, like, how can I take a break from Torah if, you know, to work? You know, how can I justify that? Well, if working is the means of sustaining your Torah, then the only way you can be involved in Torah is through working, you know? I also think that it is, and I don't know if this goes more on to what like Lauren's saying or more on what Tamara's saying, I think there's a misunderstanding of how God works, you know? Like, is there a reality that God provides? Yes. Must be right? But what does that mean? What that means is that not necessarily that God made it so that he's gonna like magically like make sure that you get your paycheck, but it means that he gave you a brain, he gave you a society that like has you know, jobs available, he gave you like you know, time, you know, and he gave you all these instructions in the Torah and in Chazal that say work. That's how he's providing for you, you know, like a father provides for his son. How does a father provide for his son? Ultimately, by teaching him that he should get a livelihood and like help him facilitate his ability to like earn his own living. You know, how does God command us to do tzedakah? What's the highest level of tzedakah? Highest level of tzedakah is you ensure that a person is no longer poor by providing them with a job, you know? So like, that's what God wants us to do. So in other words, I think if you have this frum magical model of God providing for me equals without me doing anything, then you're gonna like, you know, then anything short of that is like a lack of trust in God. But if your model is God is providing for me by enabling me to work, you know, God is giving you the ability to make wealth, you know, but ability means you have to use the ability. That is God providing for you, you know? Yeah, Lauren?
No, I feel like I really like how you called it magical thinking, because I feel like that what this like statement in the Mishnah is showing, that like the true values of Judaism doesn't deny like the reality of the world. Judaism is about working within the world and within like the laws of nature, and this is kind of like, you know, supporting that and showing like all these statements in the Torah, like you were saying, is not meant to be taken literally. It's more about like, you know, whatever. I mean, it is literal and whatever.
Right. Yeah. Okay, good. So I'm just listing this as my notes here, that we've had three things. There's magical thinking, then there's denying that there are means to this end. Yeah. And then distorting how, what it means that God provides. Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, and look, there's also just like, and maybe I'm just thinking about this because I taught a pasuk in my high school class today about laziness, just plain Mishlaic laziness, right? The compulsive need to avoid all immediate pain and conflict. And there is pain and conflict involved in working. And like Torah is pure pleasure. And in terms, well, not pure pleasure, Torah, the more involved in Torah you get, then the more pleasurable it is. I also think that like, in terms of the audience of this pasuk, I think that the more involved in Torah you are, then in some ways, the more you can fall into this trap, because the harder it will be for you to justify like not being involved in Torah, because you realize how great it is. Okay. Yeah, Lauren.
Yeah, I think following up on that, like you could come to realize that like it's not a waste for you to be spending time on your job because that job is helping you to support your Torah.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
if you don't have that job, then you're gonna eventually, let's say, go hungry, and then you won't be able to even spend time on Torah because you
Right.
won't have any food to eat, and your mind will deteriorate. Whatever, you know what I mean? Like you
Right.
need the Kemach to have the Torah.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, which is that this is part of your avodas Hashem. Really, is it reminds me of the Rambam in Hilchos Deos, chapter 3. In fact, I'm going to read this. I really should have included this in the sources. Oh man, my computer is getting slower all the time. Okay, so the context here is this is in the laws of character traits. Okay, and I think we actually did this also in Pirkei Avos earlier last year. But what the Rambam is I'll tell you the punchline now, and then we'll read it. The punchline is the Rambam is going to culminate in Shlomo HaMelech's statement in Mishlei, "B'chol derechacha da'ehu v'hu yiyasher orchosecha." In all your ways, know him, and he will straighten your paths. So, okay, this is in Hilchos Deos chapter 3. So he says, so he criticizes, yeah, I know, that's when we did this. He criticizes people for being ascetics, okay, and like giving up all the worldly involvement. So then he says, in Halacha 2, person should direct all of his actions in order to know God alone. All of his sitting and standing and speech should be for that purpose. Ketzad, how so? He starts off with work. When he is involved in transactions or he does work to get payment, he should not have in his heart the intent to just accumulate money alone. But rather he should intend to do these things so that he should provide his body with his needs in food and drink and dwelling in a house and getting married. Okay, so work should be not an end in itself, but a means to your needs. Okay, but then he says, when he eats and drinks and has relations, you shouldn't only have in mind to just for enjoyment. Okay. To the point where you only eat and drink what is sweet to the palate, and you have relations to have enjoyment. Rather, he should have in mind to eat and drink to make his body healthy. And therefore you shouldn't eat and whatever you desire, like a dog or a donkey. You should eat the things that benefit you, whether they're bitter or sweet. And you shouldn't eat unhealthy things, even though they're healthy for you, they're sweet to you. Okay, fine. So then he goes through other stuff like that about health. Okay, then he says like this. This is what I wanted to get to. Nimsa hamahalach b'derech kol yemei chayav. Sorry, kol yumav kulan. Consequently, someone who follows this path all the days of his life, oved es Hashem tami. He's constantly serving Hashem. Al filu b'shah shenose v'nosin. Even when he's working. Vafilu b'shah shebo. Even when he's having relations. Mivnei shemachshavto b'kol kadesh yimsa tzrachav. Because his intent in everything is to attain his needs. Ad she'yeh gufo shalim lavod es Hashem. To the point where his body will be intact to serve God. Even when he's sleeping, if he's sleeping in order to rest his mind, and rest his body, so he doesn't become sick, because he can't serve Hashem when he's sick. So then consequently his sleep will be service of God. Okay, so you're serving God even when you're unconscious. This is what the Chachamim meant when they said, All your actions should be for the sake of heaven. This is what Shlomo meant when he said, in all your ways know him and he will straighten your paths. So I don't know to what extent Rבינו Yona is saying this, but what I'm saying is that when you're working, if it's real to you that earning a parnasa is a means to the end of Torah, whether that's learning Torah or keeping Torah, so then, and that's why you're doing the parnasa, so then your parnasa is avodas Hashem. It's actually part of your avodah. It's not just like some hoop you have to jump through to get there. Okay, so I'm going to add that to the idea. And because earning a livelihood is a necessary means to this end, then earning your livelihood is avodas Hashem. Yeah. Okay, good. That was good. Okay, so that satisfied my need to get chidushim and nuances out of this. I think this is beyond just like the simple like you need to work in order to learn. Okay, now this next part is interesting. Okay, and this is also an idea that I think, thank God, I think the people who are in the shiur right now have been accustomed to. Okay, but we're in a society that says the opposite. So he says, if there's no Torah, there's no flower. So again, the problem with this is if you take it literally, that's not true. There are plenty of people who have parnasa, right, and they don't have Torah. But now the Rבינו is switching it. He says, since he doesn't have Torah, then the flower will not yield a beneficial effect. For a man is only benefited by his wealth in order that his bodily needs should be available and that he should have the freedom to be involved in Torah right? So the idea is wealth is not an end in and of itself, but is only given to you so that you can be involved in Torah. And the Havamina here is pretty clear, which is that wealth is an end in and of itself. Okay. In fact, I don't even need to type this here. Yeah. Okay. So the question here is, so if I ask you, like, why do people think this? Go read Koheles. Go listen to Security and Wealth on TTL. Whatever it is, 2, 3, 4. I forgot which one it is. Okay, but there's a lot of good shiurim on this. But what I'm interested in here is what is the chiddush of saying this? Again, I think that the standard audience of Pirkei Avos was a chassid will already be familiar with this. So there's some like either conceptual chiddush or practical like application that you can get out of this that is beyond like the basic idea. Again, I think for America, this is a radical idea. Like I think everything we do is geared. Everything that is done in America is like geared towards the fact that like wealth is good in and of itself. So this is a chiddush in terms of our culture. Tamar?
I think the way that Rבינו is saying it is actually a little bit of a not like an extreme stance. Like I'm not calling it extreme, but it's more extreme than you would think.
Yeah.
Because he's saying that it sounds like he's saying that if you don't have Torah, like you may as well not have flour. There's no benefit,
Right. Yeah, that is true.
Is
right?
not what I would have thought.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, right? He's saying that your wealth has no purpose if there's no if you're not using it for Torah, right? Yeah, that is a good point, right? So, what is the effect? Is can we just like articulate what that strong phrasing of it does to a person in terms of the way they view it, or in terms of practicality?
To me, it's like I don't know about practicality, but like. You would kind of think like, okay, the main point is Torah and the flower is really means to an end. But like, if you have flower, it's also good, like.
Yeah,
that.
right. Right.
And like he seems to not be saying that, not that.
Right. That's true. Okay. That's a good point. Right. So he is right. There are things that are good as means and as ends, and he seems to be saying, no, it's only good if the end is to be involved in Torah. Yeah. All right. I think that's a good idea. Hold on a second here. In other words, it's not that wealth is good as an end and as a means, but it is only good as a means. Okay. Anyone else have any ideas on this, Rבינו Yona? Because I have one more insight. Okay, so I think that this is like the practical application of the clause as a whole, okay, is is what do you call? Hold on a second here. What do you call the thing when you go bowling and they put the bumpers in the lane? There's like a
For
term.
the gutters?
Yeah, in the gutters. Yeah. Is there a term for the? I feel like there's a phrase that people use. I just don't go bowling that much. Okay, I feel like that is what the Mishnah does, or maybe if you want to use a different analogy, it's giving you a litmus test. I'll say litmus test. Okay, maybe that's not the proper analogy, but I'll say it anyway. Okay, this is giving you a litmus test for relating to livelihood in the proper way. Okay, namely, if you find yourself like, I'm going to say slacking off on your livelihood because, yeah, maybe it's just bumpers. I don't know. Because of Torah, then you are falling into one of the traps of the first clause. Okay. But if you find yourself slacking off in Torah or getting overly involved in wealth as in a way that is disconnected from your Torah, then you need the second clause. Okay. In other words, this is like if a person, I think this is very common for I could speak for my contemporaries. I don't make enough money to fall into this trap, but like, a lot of people, my contemporaries, like, wake up one day and they're like, what am I doing? I am just working all day and just not learning, like, what am I working for if not for the learning, like that is the that is the trap that they are, a lot of these people have enough money. I mean, again, I don't want to go into the whole thing about how you evaluate your wealth. That's a whole study, but like, are you okay, I've said this many times, okay, but I'll say it again because it's the best depiction of it, is in Breaking Bad in season 1, whichever the Tuco episode after the Tuco episode is, again, the premise of Breaking Bad is Walter White is a chemistry teacher, high school chemistry teacher, who is diagnosed with cancer, and he has a wife and a teenage son and a baby on the way. And he is worried that he's going to die and they're not going to have enough to provide for a living. So what he does is he goes and he gets involved in making crystal meth, and he makes the best quality meth. And then he gets involved in selling it. But in the beginning of the show, he's only selling it to provide for his family. So there's this beautiful scene where he makes the first sale, okay? And he has the money and he's sitting like in the lot where he made the sale. And he goes through and he's thinking out loud and he says, okay, our mortgage is blah, blah, blah. And he says the numbers, and 4-year college is going to be this and this. And maybe he says like, down payment on a house. And he calculates exactly how much money ballpark. Okay. Not exactly. He calculates ballpark estimate. How much meth will I need to make and sell in order to provide for my family? And once I get that, I'm going to stop. Okay. Now, obviously the show goes on and he doesn't stop. Okay. But that's the point, is that's how you should be looking at your wealth, that your wealth should be tied to your Torah needs. And if you lose sight of that, then you need this Mishnah, and if you lose sight of it in the other way, where you're just not even involved in calculating your practical needs and you just think that it can be involved in Torah and the needs will be provided, that's also a problem. So it's like keeping you in the lane, so to speak. That's my take on the Rambam Yona. Okay, any questions on that? Or can we go on?
It sounds like middle path.
Yes, it is a middle path, right? It's an interesting kind of middle path because I think we often think of the middle path in the Rambam sense of like two emotional extremes. And this might be two emotional extremes, but it really is two distorted ways of thinking about either Torah or Parnasa, So it is a middle path in between the two. Okay, next is Meiri, who takes a radically different approach. Okay, Meiri says like this. Okay, background information here, okay? Galen, Okay, Galen was a physician, and I actually recently found out Galen was Marcus Aurelius's actual doctor. Okay, which is pretty cool. Okay, so Galen is like the father of medicine in one of the most accomplished of all medical researchers of antiquity. He basically, in the same way that Aristotle like came up with frameworks that basically everyone adopted and thought about, for like 1,000 years after him or more. Galenic medical theory like dominated thinking for centuries. Okay, I don't know how long exactly. Okay, so the Meiri is going to be expressing this in like outdated medical terms, but we can translate it loosely into like modern terms. If anyone has knowledge of like health stuff, then feel free to chime in. Okay, so he says like this: Hakemach bahena al dakus hamazonos asher hiskika chachmaso yisala lezeh nivra. So flour refers to the fineness. Okay, and I put this in quotation marks because I think this is like a Galenic concept. I don't think we have a modern equivalent of fine foods. Okay, but you'll see what he means from context. Fine foods that God's wisdom necessitated for this creation. He's pardo bezeh mishar balei, and through which he separated man from other animals. K'omram zal, like Chazal say in the Gemara Pesachim 1:18a, Kish Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu la'adam v'kutz v'dardar tatzmiach lach v'chaltas esav hasadeh. When God said to man, thorns and thistles will sprout for you, and you will eat the grass of the field. Amar, then Adam said, Oy li, ani v'chamri nochal be'evos echad. Woe unto me, my donkey and I will eat from the same trough. But then once God said, by the sweat of your brow you will eat bread, niskara daito. Then Adam's mind was at ease. So Adam thought that like literally that we're gonna have to eat the same thing as the animals, but no, man gets different food. Va'amar alzeh in Kemach in Torah. So this is what he means when he says, if there's no flour, there's no Torah. Klomar lule shenidkaku mizonosav lefi dakus chomro. If man's food would not have been created as refined as it is, lo haya magia l'shlemus. Sorry, lefi dakus chomro, in order to match his refined being. Okay, his refined material, literally, lo haya magia l'shlemus haTorah, then he would never reach the perfection of Torah. V'chein, okay, lule, we'll summarize after this. Lule shakavanim b'metzius hu shlemus haTorah, were it not for the fact that the aim of man's being in the world is the perfection of Torah, lo his kikam chachmasis barach b'metzius so lios mezonosav nivcharim v'nivdakim v'neosim l'kibul hachachma. God's wisdom would not have necessitated preparing such choice, select food appropriate for receiving wisdom. Okay, ki haya ze az levatala. Then this would have been for naught. V'kiven b'zeh lios ha'adam misorer amalas mitziuso b'nivraim hashvelim shlo haisa lechinam. With this, the Tana intended to make man aware of his superior existence among the earthly creatures. I just lost my place in the Hebrew. Yeah, shelo haisa lechinam, that it was not for naught. Yeah, not for no purpose. V'yizaris atzmo lahashlim kavanas mitziuso v'az yifrav yesha v'yasef peri lamala. He should motivate himself then to bring to fruition the aim of his existence, and then his salvation will flourish and he will produce more fruit above. Okay, so first, before I ask what the summary of the Meiri is, what question that we asked is he like taking a firm stance on here that the whole idea comes from? Yeah, Lauren?
Is it the definition of Kemach?
Yeah,
like
it's
Kemach. It's literally Kemach.
Exactly, literally Kemach, right? So his whole thing stems from like how he's understanding Kemach. Okay, so what is the? Let me just copy and paste the summary thingy for Meiri. Should have set this up ahead of time. I apologize. Okay, summary of Meiri. So we need to define what is the hava amina of im ein kemach in Torah, and what is the idea, and what's the hava amina of im ein Torah in kemach, and what is the idea, and then what is a practical application. And speaking of food, I just need to pause this really quickly and turn off my chicken stock that I'm making. Hold on just 1 second. I will be right back. I'm going to pause the recording. Okay, so what is the Meiri getting at here? What would you say? You could say either the Havmina first or the idea or whatever you want. Yeah, Lauren?
I'm not totally sure, but is the idea somehow that like our like elevated levels of food reflects our elevated like perfection in the universe from that we get, I guess, from the Torah? So somehow.
So yes, but what do you mean by reflects?
I guess maybe it necessitates. I'm not totally sure.
Okay, yeah. So that's what he's getting at. Okay, so let me actually, what I'm going to do, I forgot I put this here. Rביnu Bachya ben Asher, it takes the same approach as the Meiri, but he just like states it a little bit more bluntly. So he says like this: "In Torah in Kemach, im lo haysa Torah, if it not for the Torah, lo haya mazon nivchar nimsa b'olam, there would be no choice food in the world. Ella hayu ochlim asavim kebehemos, we would eat grass like animals. L'kach nitan lo la'adam mazon nivchar b'shvil haTorah u'bizchusa." Therefore, it was for this reason that man was given choice food for the sake of the Torah and its merit. That's why the man was given to the recipients of the Torah. Okay, that's a separate idea. So this is where he says it more bluntly. It is known that a person's ability to understand concepts and to know sciences is in accordance with the fineness and purity of choice nutrition. Shari b'nei hakfarim, he says, here's a proof. The villagers, they don't have any choice food. They eat barley, which is like an animal type food. And they eat coarse, thick foods. It's not possible for them to understand concepts. It's not as possible for them to understand concepts as it is for the city dwellers who eat fattier, healthier foods. Okay, so he is saying, just to put these in terms here, so it's not just that it reflects this, is he saying that that the only reason why God created fine foods is because man needs them in order to be able to engage in higher level thinking. Okay, and were it not for man's superiority over animals, these foods would not exist, and man would eat the same food as animals. Yeah, Lauren, do you have a question or comment?
I guess like clarification. Is it talking about like if you eat healthier, then you'll have like a better Torah? Is that?
Yes, he is saying that, and that's why I'm saying like they're going based on some Galen idea of like foods being zach instead of av, like pure instead of coarse. I don't know if there's any corollary to that in our understanding of nutrition currently, but like you could definitely imagine that there are certain types of food or diets that would make, that, I mean, you can imagine this. I don't know if this is actually true. Certain types of food that are conducive to like high brain functioning versus types of food that are like conducive to either intellectual it affects your mind, or that it affects your energy levels, let's say, right? And like, let's say let's talk about carbs for a second, right? Is that if you are getting your energy based on glucose, then you have all of these ups and downs that like, you'll have energy when you're like on the up, but like when you're on the down and you crash and you're starving and you're cranky, you won't be able to like concentrate as well in your learning. Whereas if you are low carb, like keto, so then you have a constant energy level, and you will not be tired, or you won't be hungry. It's like it could be Rambam Bachya is definitely taking it like literally your ability to understand concepts is dependent on the type of food you eat. I don't know if it's like that clean cut in current nutrition, but loosely speaking, you could still say that like, that there are foods that are better for health, and health is better for brain activity, and then the opposite. So I think that's what he's saying here. Yeah, Tamar?
Just to like to understand the organization, is this only one direction? This idea that you wrote sounds to me like it's both directions, kind of.
Oh, maybe I wrote both of them. Yeah, you're right. This really goes here. In Torah, in Kemach. If there was no Torah, then God would not make this kind of food. Yeah, you're right. Thanks for catching that. Yeah, Ayala?
So do you think this idea can be expanded to other like sophistications, I guess, or like more developed things that man has over animals, like more technologies, different things like that, which are like side effects of having an intellect?
Question. I definitely think that the application could be there, but I don't know if you can make the statement about God, that he seems to be trying to say that in Kemach definitively that sorry, let me back up for 1 second here. We said that the problem in the second clause is it seems not true. That what do you mean in Torah in Kemach? There are people who have Kemach and not Torah, right? So Rבינו Yona answered that by saying, no, they have Kemach, but they don't really, it's not serving any purpose. So that's how he answered the question. The way the Meiri's answering the question is saying God would not have created Kemach, So regarding your question about the technology thing, I don't know if there's a basis for saying that God wouldn't have made, let's say, for example, let's use Rabbi Friedman's favorite example from the Shall Have It open houses, computer chips come from silicon, and sand has the property to make like computer chips, I don't know if you could say that God would have made sand differently if man didn't, use it. Like, I like as a metaphysical statement, I don't know if you could say that, but he is saying that about food. Yeah, Tamar?
This is very speculative, but do you think that there's also like do you think this could also be interpreted in the lens of like a psychological effect of like eating refined foods helps you feel a certain way about yourself that helps you be involved in Torah?
I definitely think that there's a psychological element of food, and I think that's why on the place where we see that. Well, okay, I'll ask you, where in halacha do we see that there is like philosophical perfection in the like psychological enjoyment we get from food? I know it's a very vague question.
Is it Yom Tov?
Yeah, I was going to say Yom Tov and Oneg Shabbos. Simchas Yom Tov and Oneg Shabbos. That like on Shabbos and Yom Tov, we have like Simchas Yom Tov, I think definitely is the case. I think it's actually easier to make the case for Oneg Shabbos that you have a greater quantity of food than you need, because like back then they would have 2 meals a day. On a Shabbos you have 3, and then richer, more enjoyable foods. That it's not for health reasons, but it's to put you in a frame of mind to be able to be involved in Torah. So yeah, Tamar, I think you can extend that to the psychological enjoyments from food. Yeah, Lauren?
I'm wondering if like instead of saying that like God only created, let's say, the flower so that they can have the Torah. I mean, maybe I'm getting confused here. I was wondering if you could say that like Kemach only exists because of like man's intellect, which is Torah. That's not what he's saying, though.
You
like
mean
that we
like,
use intellect to develop new foods and like.
Oh, that's interesting.
More,
that is interesting. Yeah,
kind of foods.
That is interesting. So I think that is a reasonable idea. Like, that you don't see animals growing wheat and then grinding it into flour and then having the whole siddur de pas and making bread. And that it could be a function of their intellect. I don't know if that's what he's saying. Sounds like he's saying God wouldn't have created it, and he would have condemned man to eat the same foods as his animals.
Right. I guess I was just curious if like God actually created flour or man figured out how to make flour.
Right. Yeah. I definitely hear that as a possibility of what it means for God creating flour. Like when we say Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, God doesn't literally bring forth bread from the earth. He gives man the ability to cultivate bread. Right. Okay. What's the havmin of each of these things, and then what's the practical application? You could do either one. Yeah, Ayala?
Maybe for the first one in Kemach in Torah, it's like again confusing like the fine foods or these other like I guess physical pleasures which are like confusing them for like the main thing, and you like are looking at those as the good, but forgetting that like that was only a good so that you can have this even way greater good of Torah.
Okay, I think that's true for the second clause. Like the way I'm saying, and you could feel free to argue if you think it's fair for the first clause. I think the second clause is saying, so the Havamina is there would still be fine foods even without Torah, which means that fine foods have an intrinsic value which is not connected at all with Torah. So do you see because structurally speaking, the way the first Havamina is going to be is if there is no flour, there still can be Torah, I think.
Yeah, so I think what I'm saying based off of that, if there's no flour, there still can be Torah, meaning that like we see flour as like the end.
Yeah.
Or the mistake is seeing flour as the end, but it's like, no, even if there is no flour, there's something better. Which I hear you're saying it's kind of like the second half too.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this: does my attaching that to the second half accomplish the same thing as you attaching it to the first half? Because if so, then I think there's another idea to get out of the first half. Unless there's a nuance that you think that you can get out of reading into the first half that you can't get from what I'm saying. All right, think about it. Anyone else have any ideas for Havamina? Because I have something else here. Okay, so here's what I think. Okay, going with the Meiri and the Rabbeinu Bekius premise, he's saying that you need to eat certain foods in order to be able to maximize the powers of your intellect. Okay, and for us, we would translate that into health in general. Okay, that like you need to take care of your physical health in order to be involved in Torah. So I think the Havamina here is this is aimed at people who think that they can achieve their potential in Torah without caring for their nutrition. Okay. And unfortunately, you do see this in the frum world a lot. You see people who are, rabbis, Talmidei Chachamim, who are extremely overweight, or they don't exercise, or like they smoke, or and like that is a distortion, because if you truly value Torah, you would optimize your body to be able to get Torah, and so to think that you can get Torah without Kemach is a big mistake in how you relate to Torah, or in terms of like your understanding of Kemach. So what turns out, and this is what I like about this, is that structurally the practical application is the same for the Meiri as it is for Rabbeinu Yona, but this is giving you bumpers for your relationship between eating and Torah, right? Is that if you find yourself only caring about Torah and not about eating healthy, then you need to go to a nutritionist, okay, and recognize like the impact of diet on your learning. And if you are really into fine foods or nutrition, but not in a manner that is a means to Torah, then you are relating to that pleasure in a distorted way. Okay, so I think like structurally it's the same thing as Rabbeinu Yona. It's just that he's shifting it to food. Yeah, Lauren?
Yeah, I feel like there are definitely like a lot of people that are obsessed with health, and then it's like just the whole point is just for health. There's no like higher goal aside from living
exactly
healthy.
Right. Like as if the purpose of it is I honestly I don't know what health nuts say when you ask them what's the purpose of what you're doing. Like if a person said, so I don't get sick, that I can accept just as like a basic thing, that like being sick is painful and shortens your life and that's bad. But if they just said like to live longer, you would have to ask them for what, so you could exercise more. Like there is a let's see if I saved it here. Hold on.
Have you heard of the Huberman Lab, or it's like a podcast?
Yeah.
I heard him
Andrew
speak
Huber, I know
once.
the name from Tim Ferriss. I don't know.
Yeah, he's so I think when I heard him on the Tim Ferriss podcast, he just sounded like super obsessed with all these small details, which are really cool. But in my head, I was wondering, like, to what point, I don't know.
Right. Oh, actually, that's another good point, right? Is that there is a diminishing returns, that you can get so involved in health that it actually takes away from your Torah. Halavai people have that problem, but like there are people who if you, let's say you spend all day working out, okay, so your body's gonna get really strong, but like you're not gonna be able to, you have to balance that with Torah, okay. There's a great Onion article that has a headline and the picture, Onion being the satire publication. It's this guy in a gym who's like buff and like looking confused, and I think the headline is like, local man wonders. Wait, what's the headline? The headline is something like local man gets strong and wonders now what? But that's not even how people think of it. They just have an infinite, I'm just infinitely going to be involved in this thing, So I'll make a note of that as well. Is additionally, even though health is important, it is a means to an end. So if you get involved in the means to the point where it diminishes or compromises your end, then that's also a problem. Okay. One more half explanation for tonight, okay, which is the Rashbats. Okay, we're not even gonna go through the whole thing. Sforno, Sforno also says the same thing as the Meiri and the Rambam, but he says it in an even stronger way. He says, if there's no flower, a person will not be able to be involved in Torah, and it's proper to strive to some extent to attain what he needs from it. That's really like the Rביnu Yona. Likewise, if there's no Torah, then behold, there's no flower, the purpose of which is to be food for a person in truth. But this person, I didn't finish this, but this person, hold on. I just want to make sure. Let me see how the English translates this. I don't know if I didn't read from the online Sforno. I think the online Sforno is good, but I remember this meaning something different. Maybe I'm just mistranslating it. So this English translation says, if there's no Torah, there's no flour. For flour is a food inherently meant for man's consumption when he is distinguished from animals. But when there's no Torah, flour becomes like animal fodder to a man. So he's saying then the flour becomes. So, but this, okay, this is for food for a person in truth, because man is unique. Okay, then the food becomes like animal fodder for him. Yeah, I think the reason why I included this Sforno here is because he is I made, it's getting close to Thanksgiving. I made this statement, I think I talked about this on a podcast, that like I was at a Thanksgiving meal and it was with like non-religious people and non-Jews, and I grew up with Thanksgiving being about Thanksgiving, like there's a thing that when you sit at the Thanksgiving table, like many families have a thing where like you say what you're thankful for. And I was at this meal and like no one had, there was no effort made to like reflect on what we're thankful for. It was just eating, and I was talking about this with my Harusa Ken, and he said, it was basically just one big, it was like an animal feeding. If your food is going in and you're not thanking God, so then you're no different than an animal. And like that's I think what the Sforno was highlighting from this. Like you're munching away on this like fine food, but if it's not as a means to Torah, then it's just like it'd be like what you should think to yourself is taking a really expensive food and just giving it to like a donkey to eat. Like that's basically what you are when you're not connecting your eating to your Torah. Okay. So the last one is the Rashbat. So he objects to the text of the Mishnah as we have it. So he says, okay, so first he says the same thing as Rambam and Yona. Torah. If he doesn't have anything to eat, how could he be involved in Torah? This is an interesting midrash. He says the Torah was only given to the generation of the wilderness who ate the man, and secondarily it was given to those who eat truma, which is the kohanim, which is interesting because he's saying that like in an ideal situation we wouldn't have to work, so you could just be involved in Torah. So the first generation that got the Torah, that was their scenario, is that they did not have to work, they just got fed. And then the closest thing to that we have is the Kohanim, who get sustained by the rest of Klal Yisrael. Okay, I don't know what the idea the Mechilta is saying is, but like that's, it's reflected in that. Okay, then he says, Imin Torah and Kemach, Kain he girs nusachas Rבינו Moshe is all. That's how the Rambam has it. V'chein he b'ktsas mishnayos. That's how it is in some mishnahs. V'zeh davar nir she'eno emes. Seems like this is not true. Shari kol Kemach she'ba'olam eno elal amiharetz. There's a lot of flour in the world that's for the ignoramuses. Al kain hutzach Rבינו Yona zal lefarsho b'dochak. Therefore, Rבינו Yona needed to give like a forced explanation. Achar she'en bo Torah ma yo'il lo Kemach she'biado, saying that since he doesn't have the flour, Torah, what benefit will be the flour that he possesses? So he doesn't like Rבינו Yona. But then he finds another version of the Mishnah that says, yesh Torah yesh Kemach. Other versions of the Mishnah state, if there is Torah, then there is flour. Because if someone, Torah, someone who has Torah in his possession, HaKadosh Baruch Hu maspik lo parnasaso, God will ensure that he has a sufficient livelihood. Okay, and then he goes through a bunch of psukim that support this, and the psukim are actually, and statements of Chazal are more problematic than we have time for tonight. Okay, so let's just take this idea. So the clearest expression of this idea I have, there's two things. If he means what Shimon Bar Yochai said, that there is a level of Torah you can get to where like God miraculously provides for you through others, so then I don't really have much more to say because many people try that and it doesn't work. But then there's the Rambam at the end of Sefer Zra'im, okay, of Hilchos Shmita V'Yovel, which I'm going to read here. So the Rambam says, Lama lo zacha Levi b'nachlas Eretz Yisrael uv'bizasa imechav. Why didn't the tribe of Levi merit an inheritance of the land of Israel and the spoils along with their brethren? So Levi does not get, Shevet Levi, which is the Levim and the Kohanim, don't get any property, don't get any territory. They just get cities. And they didn't get to take the spoils in the war. Okay, so why not? Because they were separated to serve Hashem and to minister to Him. And to teach the way his upright ways and his righteous judgments to the masses. That's the whole purpose of the Shevet, is to teach. As it says, they shall teach your laws to Jacob and your judgment to Israel. Lefikach, did I not translate this? Oh yeah. Lefikach, therefore, huvdulu midarch elam. They were separated from the ways of the world. Okay, meaning like derech eretz. Lo orchim milchama Israel. They don't go to war with Israel. V'lo nochlin, and they don't inherit the land. V'lo zochin la'atma b'kol kufa, and they don't get merit through their own bodily power. Elohim chel Hashem. They're the legion, the soldiers of Hashem. Shnemar, as it says, Barech Hashem chelo. Bless Hashem, bless O Hashem, His legion. V'hu baruch hu zika lahen, and God provides for them. Shnemar ani chalkecha v'nachal lasacha. Hashem says, I am your portion and your inheritance. Okay, so unclear what that means. I mean, plain pshat, it means that God, sustains the Levim and the Kohanim through the tithes and stuff like that. Okay, so that's what it means. But then the Rambam expands it, and he says, not only lo shevet Levi bilvad, not. Oh, let me just move this up here. Okay, v'lo shevet Levi bilvad. Not only the tribe of Levi, elakol ish v'ish mibaya ha'olam, any member of humanity, so even non-Jews, asher nadva rucho oso, whose spirit voluntarily moves him, v'hevi midato, lihibadel lamo lifnei Hashem l'sharso l'ovdo, and his understanding causes him to separate. I think there's a girsa discrepancy in here. Okay, I have it translated here. His understanding causes him to separate, to stand before Hashem. to minister to him and to serve him, Kedei Ladas Hashem, in order to know Hashem. V'halach yashar k'moshe asahu Elokim. He walks upright as God made him. Uparak me'al tzavaro ol hachishbonos harabim asher bikshu bnei adam. And he removes from upon his neck the yoke of the many calculations which people seek. So that person, harizen is kadosh kodashim. He becomes sanctified as holy of holies. V'yihiyu Hashem chalko v'nachalaso le'olam u'olam. Hashem will be his portion and heritage forever and ever. V'yizkel lo ba'olam hazeh davar hamaspik lo. He will receive in this world, he'll merit in this world that which is enough for him. Just like the Kohanim and Levim received through the halachic system. David Omer Hashem manas chalki v'kosi ata tomich gorli. This is what David said. Hashem is the lot of my portion. You are my cup. You support my lot. So this is, practically speaking, he's saying any person can become a pseudo Levi, an honorary Levi. That you can, if you separate yourself and dedicate yourself to serving God, to knowing Hashem and walking upright, and you cast off the yoke of the calculations of the many, God will provide for you. Okay, so to me that does not sound like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, because Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says your work will be done. I mean, okay, maybe it could be Shimon Bar Yochai. Let's just forget that Gemara, pretend we haven't seen it. What does the Rambam mean here? Is he talking about there is a special like hashgacha that God will like arrange it so that people who devote themselves to him in this way get this, or is he saying something else? And I think you could say that. You could say that God will provide, through hashgacha, that we have the brachos and the klalos, and the brachos promise you that you'll have you'll have your food in its proper time, and you'll eat and be satisfied. So you could say it's hashgacha. But I think there's another approach as well. Yeah, Tamar?
I don't see what I'm about to say as being separate from the existence of a hashgacha, but like, it sounds like this person needs very little.
Right.
Also,
I think
that seems to be part of the picture.
Yeah, right. So you're right. This does not exclude the hashgacha thing, but I think this person has changed the way that they relate, changed what they seek, basically, right? That he's cast off from upon his neck the yoke of the many calculations, which to me, I don't know exactly what the Rambam means, but I'll give you an example of this, is people are trying to get ahead and to get promotions and to get like a certain standard of living that is completely dependent on the people around them. There are people who live in third world countries who have enough to eat, but don't live in a house with many rooms or with like, TVs and stuff like that. And they're happy and they don't complain, and I think, unfortunately we live in a world where like, fortunately and unfortunately, we live in a world where, if we didn't have, like for most people, if you don't have a car, I mean, maybe New York City is different. If you don't have a car, that's like a real stumbling block, that's like not stumbling block. That's like a real liability. All the more so if you didn't have electricity or running water or multiple rooms or furniture to sit on, or different pairs of clothing, So like, but these things are not real needs. You can live without them. And if a person were to actually only live on what they needed and to prioritize learning, that's a different kind of existence. And first of all, it'll be much easier for you to get what you need. And if the hashgacha is on your side, then it's going to be even easier, So I do think that there is a level where im yesh Torah yesh Kemach, that the Torah can actually cause you to get enough Kemach, through your relationship with Torah. So that's like a certain perfection of your relationship with Torah. I was listening to a shiur from Rabbi Chait today, and he was talking about how there's a mishnah later on in Avos that says pas b'melech tochal v'umayim b'mishur tishtev ars tishan b'chai tsar tichya, that you should eat bread with salt, drink small amounts of water, sleep on the ground, and live a life of pain, and Torah and toil in Torah. So it's like describing this like very like ascetic, painful, suffering lifestyle where you're just involved in Torah and you're like making all these sacrifices. So Rebbe quoted the Vilna Gaon, which I haven't seen inside, who says that description of like suffering for Torah is only at the beginning of a person's development. But eventually what happens is you become so attached to Torah that you don't need all those things anymore. So it's not a life of suffering. There's no ideal of like suffering for Torah. Like there are other religions that like in the beginning of that parak in Hilchos Deos and the Rambam, where like they idealize physical suffering. Like that's like a perfection itself. What Rebbe was saying, that the Vilna Gaon was saying is no. There is, for us, we say that you need to break through this level of suffering if you want to reach the heights of Torah. But when you're at the heights of Torah, you won't be suffering. You'll be involved in like the highest levels of enjoyment, and you just won't need all this physical stuff. So I think that might be what the Rashbats is getting at. Okay, so to summarize, I would try to answer our questions about the whole Mishnah. I don't have the energy right now, maybe because I'm not eating the right things. I don't know. But I do want to contemplate our questions about like the bird's eye view of the Mishnah, about the order and the relation between the clauses, the unity, the relation between the first and the fourth clauses. I don't guarantee that we're going to come back to this next week. But if any of us have any thoughts, let's just try to create an opportunity to talk about it before we do the next Mishnah. Okay, so but let's summarize this. So we have Rבינו Yona, who says that this really is about the relationship between Parnasa and learning, or Torah in general, that don't make the mistake of thinking that you can have Torah without Parnasa, because unless you're Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, you can't, and you'll fall into magical thinking, or you will deny that there are means that you need to get to the end, or you will think that God providing for you means something crazy, like money flying into your bank account, or you'll be giving into laziness. Instead, recognize that no, you need to involve yourself in a livelihood to be able to sustain your Torah, and that is part of your avodas Hashem. Likewise, don't fall into the trap of pursuing wealth as an end in and of itself, not connected to Torah, and use these two principles to like make sure that you're in the middle path. Meiri and Rבינו Bachya ben Asher and Sforno said that this is really about your relationship between Torah and food or nutrition, that recognize that if you really want to maximize your Torah, you have to eat the right foods and take care of your physical health. Don't think that you can just like neglect your health and just like eat junk food and like be at prime level of Torah. And by the way, like it might not be a thing where like your brain function is like suffering. It might be that if you just eat a diet high in sugar, you're cutting off 20 years of your life that you could have spent learning Torah, So like there's quality and quantity. And on the flip side, don't be involved too much in health or too much in food to the point where you're not relating to it as a means to Torah. No, it only exists so that you can be involved in Torah. So use that as a measure as well. And the other Rashbats, which is that the different gears of yesh Torah, yesh Kemach, that there is a type of involvement in Torah where God will provide you with your Kemach, and that's if you make Torah a very high priority and like minimize your needs. Recognize that many of the things you think are needs are actually just want, and you can go without them and devote all of your energy and time to Torah. But again, that's a very high level, and that's another thing. Also, is like not only do we live in a society with a higher standard of living, where like you can't get by on being a water hauler and like or a wood hewer like the Tanaim did, but also like let's say, again, I'm speaking as a man, but like good luck finding a wife and kids who like are okay with you like living at a minimum wage, and like everyone just like wearing rags. Like I just don't think like someone who's like Rabbi Kiva's wife who says he should go and learn yeshiva another 7 years, and like she's willing to put up with that. That's a very, very high level for her also. So like you need everyone to be on the same page for this. And I just think in this society at this time, that's just not going to happen. Yeah, Ayala.
This is kind of a very random question, but I was thinking about it recently about Eshes Chayil, about how there's like so many psukim describing her as like a great businesswoman, whatever. And I feel like it kind of has to do with this parak in the fact, like the sense that she is making a livelihood for herself and for her family, but also that she's like taking care of the physical and psychological needs.
Right.
And it does seem like she's getting like luxury stuff. Like I remember how. That's
true. Right.
Yeah. So it's interesting, like
that's
the balance.
Point. Right. And I think that a point that I did not make when I gave the Eshes Chayil shiur is that the point about that is avodas Hashem. Like she is supporting, she's involved in her own perfections, but she's also supporting a whole household full of people who are involved in Torah, and that is avodas Hashem as well. Okay, very good. This was a good, if this is our last part of the Mishnah, this is a good Mishnah. But let's think about it in the back of our minds, if we can even remember the ideas we said about the other clauses. I still remember, I think, Imin Bina in Das. I don't know if I remember the other ones. So, but yeah, if we can think about those, then it'd be good. And if not, we'll move on to the next part of the Mishnah. I think the next part of the Mishnah also goes with Chachma and Ma'asim, so that might rekindle our Chachma and Yira, but we'll see. Okay, have a good night, everyone. And next, just to remind us, even though I'll say this again, next week Thursday should be fine. Tomorrow I'm planning to give Machshavah Lab, but the week after that I'm not planning to give Machshavah Lab. Okay, have a good night. Have a good Shabbos.
Thank you. You too.